But perhaps they won't fit, observed Nastasia. Not fit, just look. And he pulled out of his pocket Raskolnikov's old, broken boot, stiffly coated with dry mud. I did not go empty-handed, they took the size from this monster. We all did our best. And as to your linen, your landlady has seen to that. Here, to begin with, are 3 shirts, hempen but with a fashionable front. Well now then, 80 kopecks the cap, 2 rubles 25 kopecks the suit, together 3 rubles 5 kopecks, a ruble and a half for the boots, for you see they are very good, and that makes 4 rubles 55 kopecks, 5 rubles for the underclothes, they were bought in the lot, which makes exactly 9 rubles 55 kopecks. 45 kopecks change in coppers. Will you take it? And so, Radia, you are set up with a complete new rig-out, for your overcoat will serve and even has a style of its own. That comes from getting one's clothes from Charmer S. As for your socks and other things, I leave them to you, we've 25 rubles left. And as for Pashenka and paying for your lodging, don't you worry. I tell you she'll trust you for anything. And now, brother, let me change your linen, for I dare say you will throw off your illness with your shirt. Let me be, I don't want to. Raskolnikov waved him off. He had listened with disgust to Razumihin's efforts to be playful about his purchases. Come, brother, don't tell me I've been trudging around for nothing, Razumihin insisted. Nastasia, don't be bashful, but help me, that's it. And in spite of Raskolnikov's resistance, he changed his linen. The latter sank back on the pillows and for a minute or two said nothing. It will be long before I get rid of them, he thought. What money was all that bought with? He asked at last, gazing at the wall. Money, why your own, what the messenger brought from Varshin, your mother sent it. Have you forgotten that too? I remember now, said Raskolnikov after a long, sullen silence. Razumihin looked at him, frowning and uneasy. The door opened, and a tall, stout man whose appearance seemed familiar to Raskolnikov came in. Chapter 4. Zosimov was a tall, fat man with a puffy, colorless, clean-shaven face and straight flaxen hair. He wore spectacles, and a big gold ring on his fat finger. He was 27. He had on a light gray fashionable loose coat, light summer trousers, and everything about him loose, fashionable and spick and span. His linen was irreproachable, his watch chain was massive. In manner he was slow and, as it were, nonchalant, and at the same time studiously free and easy. He made efforts to conceal his self-importance, but it was apparent at every instant. All his acquaintances found him tedious, but said he was clever at his work. I've been to you twice today, brother. You see, he's come to himself, cried Razumihin. I see, and how do we feel now, eh? Said Zosimov to Raskolnikov, watching him carefully and sitting down at the foot of the sofa, he settled himself as comfortably as he could. He is still depressed, Razumihin went on. We've just changed his linen and he almost cried. That's very natural, you might have put it off if he did not wish it. His pulse is first-rate. Is your head still aching, eh? I am well, I am perfectly well, Raskolnikov declared positively and irritably. He raised himself on the sofa and looked at them with glittering eyes, but sank back onto the pillow at once and turned to the wall. Zosimov watched him intently. Very good, going on all right, he said lazily. Has he eaten anything? They told him, and asked what he might have. He may have anything, soup, tea, mushrooms and cucumbers, of course you must not give him, he'd better not have meat either but no need to tell you that. Razumihin and he looked at each other. No more medicine or anything, I'll look at him again tomorrow, perhaps today even, but never mind. Tomorrow evening I shall take him for a walk, said Razumihin. We are going to the Yusupov garden and then to the Palais de Cristal. I would not disturb him tomorrow at all, but I don't know, a little maybe, but we'll see. Ach, what a nuisance, I've got a housewarming party tonight, it's only a step from here. Couldn't he come, he could lie on the sofa, you are coming, Razumihin said to Zosimov. Don't forget you promised. All right, only rather later. What are you going to do? Oh, nothing, tea, vodka, herrings, there will be a pie, just our friends. And who? All neighbors here, almost all new friends, except my old uncle, and he is new too. He only arrived in Petersburg yesterday to see to some business of his. We meet once in 5 years. What is he? He's been stagnating all his life as a district postmaster, gets a little pension. He is 65, not worth talking about. But I am fond of him. Porfiry Petrovich, the head of the investigation department here, but you know him. Is he a relation of yours too? A very distant one, but why are you scowling? Because you quarreled once, won't you come then? I don't care a damn for him. So much the better. Well, there will be some students, a teacher, a government clerk, a musician, an officer, and Zametov. Do tell me please, what you or he, Zosimov nodded at Raskolnikov, can have in common with this Zametov. Oh, you particular gentleman, principles. You are worked by principles as it were by springs, you won't venture to turn round on your own account. If a man is a nice fellow, that's the only principle I go upon. Zametov is a delightful person. Though he does take bribes. Well, he does, and what of it? I don't care if he does take bribes, Razumihin cried with unnatural irritability. I don't praise him for taking bribes, I only say he is a nice man in his own way, but if one looks at men in all ways, are there many good ones left? Why, I am sure I shouldn't be worth a baked onion myself, perhaps with you thrown in. That's too little, I'd give 2 for you. And I wouldn't give more than 1 for you. No more of your jokes. Zametov is no more than a boy, I can pull his hair and one must draw him not repel him. You'll never improve a man by repelling him, especially a boy. One has to be twice as careful with a boy. Oh, you progressive dullards, you don't understand. You harm yourselves running another man down. But if you want to know, we really have something in common. I should like to know what. Why, it's all about a house painter. We are getting him out of a mess, though indeed there's nothing to fear now. The matter is absolutely self-evident, we only put on steam. A painter. Why, have I told you about it? I only told you the beginning then about the murder of the old pawnbroker woman. Well, the painter is mixed up in it. Oh, I heard about that murder before and was rather interested in it, partly, for one reason. I read about it in the papers too. Lizaveta was murdered too, Nastasia blurted out, suddenly addressing Raskolnikov. She remained in the room all the time, standing by the door listening. Lizaveta, murmured Raskolnikov hardly audibly. Lizaveta, who sold old clothes. Didn't you know her? She used to come here. She mended a shirt for you too. Raskolnikov turned to the wall where in the dirty, yellow paper, he picked out one clumsy, white flower with brown lines on it, and began examining how many petals there were in it, how many scallops in the petals, and how many lines on them. He felt his arms and legs as lifeless as though they had been cut off. He did not attempt to move, but stared obstinately at the flower. But what about the painter? Zosimov interrupted Nastasia's chatter with marked displeasure. She sighed and was silent. Why, he was accused of the murder, Razumihin went on hotly. Was there evidence against him then? Evidence indeed, evidence that was no evidence, and that's what we have to prove. It was just as they pitched on those fellows, Kok and Pestryakov at first. Phoo, how stupidly it's all done, it makes one sick, though it's not one's business. Pestryakov may be coming tonight. By the way, Radia, you've heard about the business already. It happened before you were ill, the day before you fainted at the police office while they were talking about it. Zosimov looked curiously at Raskolnikov. He did not stir. But I say, Razumihin, I wonder at you. What a busybody you are, Zosimov observed. Maybe I am, but we will get him off anyway, shouted Razumihin, bringing his fist down on the table. What's the most offensive is not their lying. One can always forgive lying. Lying is a delightful thing, for it leads to truth. What is offensive is that they lie and worship their own lying. I respect Porfiry, but what threw them out at first? The door was locked, and when they came back with the porter it was open. So it followed that Kok and Pestryakov were the murderers. That was their logic. But don't excite yourself. They simply detained them, they could not help that. And by the way, I've met that man Kok. He used to buy unredeemed pledges from the old woman. Yes, he is a swindler. He buys up bad debts too. He makes a profession of it, but enough of him. Do you know what makes me angry? It's their sickening, rotten, petrified routine. And this case might be the means of introducing a new method. One can show from the psychological data alone how to get on the track of the real man. We have facts, they say, but facts are not everything. At least half the business lies in how you interpret them. Can you interpret them then? Anyway, one can't hold one's tongue when one has a feeling, a tangible feeling, that one might be a help if only. Do you know the details of the case? I am waiting to hear about the painter. Oh yes, well, here's the story. Early on the 3rd day after the murder, when they were still dandling Kok and Pestryakov, though they accounted for every step they took and it was as plain as a pikestaff, An unexpected fact turned up. A peasant called Dushkin, who keeps a dram shop facing the house, brought to the police office a jeweler's case containing some gold earrings and told a long rigmarole. The day before yesterday, just after 8 o'clock, marked the day and the hour. A journeyman house painter, Nikolay, who had been in to see me already that day, brought me this box of gold earrings and stones and asked me to give him 2 rubles for them. When I asked him where he got them, he said that he picked them up in the street. I did not ask him anything more. I am telling you Dushkin's story. I gave him a note, a ruble that is, for I thought if he did not pawn it with me he would with another. It would all come to the same thing, he'd spend it on drink, so the thing had better be with me. The further you hide it the quicker you will find it, and if anything turns up, if I hear any rumors, I'll take it to the police. Of course, that's all taradiddle. He lies like a horse, for I know this Dushkin, he is a pawnbroker and a receiver of stolen goods, and he did not cheat Nikolay out of a 30-ruble trinket in order to give it to the police. He was simply afraid. But no matter, to return to Dushkin's story. I've known this peasant, Nikolay Dementiev, from a child. He comes from the same province and district of Zarysk. We're both Ryazan men, and though Nikolay is not a drunkard, he drinks, and I knew he had a job in that house, painting work with Dmitri, who comes from the same village too. As soon as he got the ruble he changed it, had a couple of glasses, took his change and went out. But I did not see Dmitri with him then. And the next day I heard that someone had murdered Alyona Ivanovna and her sister, Lizaveta Ivanovna, with an axe. I knew them and I felt suspicious about the earrings at once, for I knew the murdered woman lent money on pledges. I went to the house and began to make careful inquiries without saying a word to anyone. First of all I asked, "Is Nikolay here?" Dmitri told me that Nikolay had gone off on the spree. He had come home at daybreak drunk, stayed in the house about 10 minutes and went out again. Dmitri didn't see him again and is finishing the job alone. And their job is on the same staircase as the murder on the 2nd floor. When I heard all that I did not say a word to anyone, that's Dushkin's tale, but I found out what I could about the murder and went home feeling as suspicious as ever. And at 8 o'clock this morning, that was the 3rd day, you understand, I saw Nikolay coming in, not sober, though not to say very drunk. He could understand what was said to him. He sat down on the bench and did not speak. There was only one stranger in the bar and a man I knew asleep on a bench and our 2 boys. "Have you seen Dmitri?" said I. "No, I haven't," said he. "And you've not been here either?" "Not since the day before yesterday," said he. "And where did you sleep last night?" "In Pesky with the Kolomensky men." "And where did you get those earrings?" I asked. "I found them in the street," and the way he said it was a bit queer. He did not look at me. "Did you hear what happened that very evening at that very hour on that same staircase?" Said I. "No," said he. I had not heard, and all the while he was listening, his eyes were staring out of his head, and he turned as white as chalk. I told him all about it, and he took his hat and began getting up. I wanted to keep him. "Wait a bit, Nikolay," said I. "Won't you have a drink?" And I signed to the boy to hold the door, and I came out from behind the bar, but he darted out and down the street to the turning at a run. I have not seen him since. Then my doubts were at an end. It was his doing, as clear as could be. "I should think so," said Zosimov. "Wait, hear the end. Of course they sought high and low for Nikolay. They detained Dushkin and searched his house. Dmitri, too, was arrested. The Kolomensky men also were turned inside out. And the day before yesterday they arrested Nikolay in a tavern at the end of the town. He had gone there, taken the silver cross off his neck and asked for a dram for it. They gave it to him. A few minutes afterwards the woman went to the cowshed, and through a crack in the wall she saw in the stable adjoining, he had made a noose of his sash from the beam, stood on a block of wood, and was trying to put his neck in the noose. The woman screeched her hardest. People ran in. "So that's what you are up to? Take me," he says, "to such and such a police officer. I'll confess everything." Well, they took him to that police station, that is here with a suitable escort. So they asked him this and that, how old he is, 22, and so on. The question, when you were working with Dmitri, didn't you see anyone on the staircase at such and such a time? Answer, to be sure folks may have gone up and down, but I did not notice them. And didn't you hear anything, any noise and so on? We heard nothing special. And did you hear, Nikolay, that on the same day widow so-and-so and her sister were murdered and robbed? I never knew a thing about it. The first I heard of it was from Afanasy Pavlovich the day before yesterday. And where did you find the earrings? I found them on the pavement. Why didn't you go to work with Dmitri the other day? Because I was drinking. And where were you drinking? Oh, in such and such a place. Why did you run away from Dushkin's? Because I was awfully frightened. What were you frightened of? That I should be accused. How could you be frightened if you felt free from guilt? Now, Zosimov, you may not believe me, that question was put literally in those words. I know it for a fact, it was repeated to me exactly. What do you say to that? Well, anyway, there's the evidence. I am not talking of the evidence now, I am talking about that question, of their own idea of themselves. Well, so they squeezed and squeezed him and he confessed. I did not find it in the street, but in the flat where I was painting with Dmitri. And how was that? Why, Dmitri and I were painting there all day, and we were just getting ready to go, and Dmitri took a brush and painted my face, and he ran off and I after him. I ran after him, shouting my hardest, and at the bottom of the stairs I ran right against the porter and some gentlemen, and how many gentlemen were there I don't remember. And the porter swore at me, and the other porter swore too, and the porter's wife came out, and swore at us too, and a gentleman came into the entry with a lady, and he swore at us too, for Dmitri and I lay right across the way. I got hold of Dmitri's hair and knocked him down and began beating him. And Dmitri, too, caught me by the hair and began beating me. But we did it all not for temper but in a friendly way, for sport. And then Dmitri escaped and ran into the street, and I ran after him. But I did not catch him and went back to the flat alone. I had to clear up my things. I began putting them together, expecting Dmitri to come, and there in the passage in the corner by the door I stepped on the box. I saw it lying there wrapped up in paper. I took off the paper, saw some little hooks, undid them, and in the box were the earrings. Behind the door, lying behind the door, behind the door. Raskolnikov cried suddenly, staring with a blank look of terror at Razumihin, and he slowly sat up on the sofa, leaning on his hand. Yes, why, what's the matter, what's wrong? Razumihin too got up from his seat. Nothing, Raskolnikov answered faintly, turning to the wall. All were silent for a while. He must have waked from a dream, Razumihin said at last, looking inquiringly at Zosimov. The latter slightly shook his head. Well, go on, said Zosimov. What next? What next? As soon as he saw the earrings, forgetting Dmitri and everything, he took up his cap and ran to Dushkin, and as we know, got a ruble from him. He told a lie saying he found them in the street, and went off drinking. He keeps repeating his old story about the murder. I know nothing of it, never heard of it till the day before yesterday. And why didn't you come to the police till now? I was frightened. And why did you try to hang yourself? From anxiety. What anxiety? That I should be accused of it. Well, that's the whole story, and now what do you suppose they deduced from that? Why, there's no supposing. There's a clue, such as it is a fact. You wouldn't have your painter set free. Now they've simply taken him for the murderer. They haven't a shadow of doubt. That's nonsense. You are excited. But what about the earrings? You must admit that, if on the very same day and hour earrings from the old woman's box have come into Nikolai's hands, they must have come there somehow. That's a good deal in such a case. How did they get there? How did they get there? Cried Razumihin. How can you, a doctor, whose duty it is to study man and who has more opportunity than anyone else for studying human nature, how can you fail to see the character of the man in the whole story? Don't you see at once that the answers he has given in the examination are the holy truth? They came into his hand precisely as he has told us. He stepped on the box and picked it up. The holy truth, but didn't he own himself that he told a lie at first? Listen to me, listen attentively. The porter and cock and Pestriakov and the other porter and the wife of the first porter and the woman who was sitting in the porter's lodge and the man Krukov, who had just got out of a cab at that minute and went in at the entry with a lady on his arm, that is 8 or 10 witnesses, agree that Nikolai had Dmitri on the ground, was lying on him beating him, while Dmitri hung onto his hair, beating him too. They lay right across the way, blocking the thoroughfare. They were sworn at on all sides while they like children. The very words of the witnesses were falling over one another, squealing, fighting and laughing with the funniest faces, and chasing one another like children, they ran into the street. Now take careful note. The bodies upstairs were warm. You understand, warm when they found them. If they, or Nikolai alone, had murdered them and broken open the boxes, or simply taken part in the robbery, allow me to ask you one question. Do their state of mind, their squeals and giggles and childish scuffling at the gate fit in with axes, bloodshed, fiendish cunning, robbery? They just killed them, not 5 or 10 minutes before, for the bodies were still warm, and at once, leaving the flat open, knowing that people would go there at once, flinging away their booty, they rolled about like children, laughing and attracting general attention. And there are a dozen witnesses to swear to that. Of course it is strange, it's impossible indeed, but... No, brother, no buts. And if the earrings being found in Nicolay's hands at the very day and hour of the murder constitutes an important piece of circumstantial evidence against him, although the explanation given by him accounts for it, and therefore it does not tell seriously against him, one must take into consideration the facts which prove him innocent, especially as they are facts that cannot be denied. And do you suppose, from the character of our legal system, that they will accept, or that they are in a position to accept, this fact, resting simply on a psychological impossibility, as irrefutable and conclusively breaking down the circumstantial evidence? For the prosecution, no, they won't accept it, they certainly won't, because they found the jewel case and the man tried to hang himself, which he could not have done if he hadn't felt guilty. That's the point, that's what excites me, you must understand. Oh, I see you are excited. Wait a bit, I forgot to ask you, what proof is there that the box came from the old woman? That's been proved, said Razumihin with apparent reluctance, frowning. Koch recognized the jewel case and gave the name of the owner, who proved conclusively that it was his. That's bad. Now another point. Did anyone see Nikolay at the time that Koch and Pestryakov were going upstairs at first, and is there no evidence about that? Nobody did see him, Razumihin answered with vexation. That's the worst of it. Even Koch and Pestryakov did not notice them on their way upstairs, though indeed their evidence could not have been worth much. They said they saw the flat was open, and that there must be work going on in it, but they took no special notice and could not remember whether there actually were men at work in it. So the only evidence for the defense is that they were beating one another and laughing. That constitutes a strong presumption, but how do you explain the facts yourself? How do I explain them? What is there to explain? It's clear. At any rate, the direction in which explanation is to be sought is clear, and the jewel case points to it. The real murderer dropped those earrings. The murderer was upstairs, locked in, when Koch and Pestryakov knocked at the door. Koch, like an ass, did not stay at the door, so the murderer popped out and ran down, too, for he had no other way of escape. He hid from Koch, Pestryakov and the porter in the flat when Nikolay and Dmitri had just run out of it. He stopped there while the porter and others were going upstairs, waited till they were out of hearing, and then went calmly downstairs at the very minute when Dmitri and Nikolay ran out into the street, and there was no one in the entry. Possibly he was seen, but not noticed. There are lots of people going in and out. He must have dropped the earrings out of his pocket when he stood behind the door, and did not notice he dropped them, because he had other things to think of. The jewel case is a conclusive proof that he did stand there. That's how I explain it. Too clever. No, my boy, you're too clever. That beats everything. But why? Why? Because everything fits too well. It's too melodramatic. Ayok, Razumihin was exclaiming, but at that moment the door opened, and a personage came in who was a stranger to all present. Chapter 5. This was a gentleman no longer young, of a stiff and portly appearance, and a cautious and sour countenance. He began by stopping short in the doorway, staring about him with offensive and undisguised astonishment, as though asking himself what sort of place he had come to. Mistrustfully and with an affectation of being alarmed and almost affronted, he scanned Raskolnikov's low and narrow cabin. With the same amazement he stared at Raskolnikov, who lay undressed, disheveled, unwashed on his miserable dirty sofa, looking fixedly at him. Then with the same deliberation he scrutinized the uncouth, unkempt figure and unshaven face of Razumihin, who looked him boldly and inquiringly in the face without rising from his seat. A constrained silence lasted for a couple of minutes, and then, as might be expected, some scene-shifting took place. Reflecting, probably from certain fairly unmistakable signs, that he would get nothing in this cabin by attempting to overawe them, the gentleman softened somewhat, and civilly, though with some severity, emphasizing every syllable of his question, addressed Zosimov. Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, a student or formerly a student. Zosimov made a slight movement, and would have answered, had not Razumihin anticipated him. Here he is lying on the sofa, what do you want? This familiar, what do you want, seemed to cut the ground from the feet of the pompous gentleman. He was turning to Razumihin, but checked himself in time and turned to Zosimov again. This is Raskolnikov, mumbled Zosimov, nodding towards him. Then he gave a prolonged yawn, opening his mouth as wide as possible. Then he lazily put his hand into his waistcoat pocket, pulled out a huge gold watch in a round hunter's case, opened it, looked at it, and as slowly and lazily proceeded to put it back. Raskolnikov himself lay without speaking, on his back, gazing persistently, though without understanding, at the stranger. Now that his face was turned away from the strange flower on the paper, it was extremely pale and wore a look of anguish, as though he had just undergone an agonizing operation or just been taken from the rack. But the newcomer gradually began to arouse his attention, then his wonder, then suspicion and even alarm. When Zosimov said, "This is Raskolnikov," he jumped up quickly, sat on the sofa, and with an almost defiant but weak and breaking voice articulated, "Yes, I am Raskolnikov, what do you want?" The visitor scrutinized him, and pronounced impressively, "Fyodor Petrovich Luzhin, I believe I have reason to hope that my name is not wholly unknown to you." But Raskolnikov, who had expected something quite different, gazed blankly and dreamily at him, making no reply, as though he heard the name of Fyodor Petrovich for the first time. "Is it possible that you can up to the present have received no information?" asked Fyodor Petrovich, somewhat disconcerted. In reply, Raskolnikov sank languidly back on the pillow, put his hands behind his head, and gazed at the ceiling. A look of dismay came into Luzhin's face. Zosimov and Razumihin stared at him more inquisitively than ever, and at last he showed unmistakable signs of embarrassment. "I had presumed and calculated," he faltered, "that a letter posted more than 10 days, if not a fortnight ago." "I say, why are you standing in the doorway?" Razumihin interrupted suddenly. "If you've something to say, sit down. Nastasia and you are so crowded. Nastasia, make room. Here's a chair, thread your way in." He moved his chair back from the table, made a little space between the table and his knees, and waited in a rather cramped position for the visitor to thread his way in. The minute was so chosen that it was impossible to refuse, and the visitor squeezed his way through, hurrying and stumbling. Reaching the chair, he sat down, looking suspiciously at Razumihin. "No need to be nervous," the latter blurted out. "Radia has been ill for the last 5 days and delirious for 3, but now he is recovering and has got an appetite. This is his doctor, who has just had a look at him. I am a comrade of Radia's, like him, formerly a student, and now I am nursing him, so don't you take any notice of us but go on with your business." "Thank you, but shall I not disturb the invalid by my presence and conversation?" Fyodor Petrovich asked of Zosimov. "No," mumbled Zosimov, "you may amuse him." He yawned again. "He has been conscious a long time, since the morning," went on Razumihin, whose familiarity seemed so much like unaffected good nature that Fyodor Petrovich began to be more cheerful, partly, perhaps, because this shabby and impudent person had introduced himself as a student. "Your mamma," began Luzhin. Razumihin cleared his throat loudly. Luzhin looked at him inquiringly. "That's all right, go on." Luzhin shrugged his shoulders. "Your mamma had commenced a letter to you while I was sojourning in her neighborhood. On my arrival here, I purposely allowed a few days to elapse before coming to see you, in order that I might be fully assured that you were in full possession of the tidings. But now, to my astonishment—" I know," Raskolnikov cried suddenly with impatient vexation. "So you are the fiancé, I know, and that's enough." There was no doubt about Fyodor Petrovich's being offended this time, but he said nothing. He made a violent effort to understand what it all meant. There was a moment's silence. Meanwhile Raskolnikov, who had turned a little towards him when he answered, began suddenly staring at him again with marked curiosity, as though he had not had a good look at him yet, or as though something new had struck him. He rose from his pillow on purpose to stare at him. There certainly was something peculiar in Fyodor Petrovich's whole appearance, something which seemed to justify the title of fiancé, so unceremoniously applied to him. In the first place, it was evident, far too much so indeed, that Fyodor Petrovich had made eager use of his few days in the capital to get himself up and rig himself out in expectation of his betrothed. A perfectly innocent and permissible proceeding, indeed. Even his own, perhaps too complacent, consciousness of the agreeable improvement in his appearance might have been forgiven in such circumstances, seeing that Fyodor Petrovich had taken up the role of fiancé. All his clothes were fresh from the tailor's, and were all right, except for being too new and too distinctly appropriate. Even the stylish new round hat had the same significance. Fyodor Petrovich treated it too respectfully and held it too carefully in his hands. The exquisite pair of lavender gloves, real Louvain, told the same tale, if only from the fact of his not wearing them, but carrying them in his hand for show. Light and youthful colors predominated in Fyodor Petrovich's attire. He wore a charming summer jacket of a fawn shade, light thin trousers, a waistcoat of the same, new and fine linen, a cravat of the lightest cambric with pink stripes on it, and the best of it was, this all suited Fyodor Petrovich. His very fresh and even handsome face looked younger than his 45 years at all times. His dark, mutton-chop whiskers made an agreeable setting on both sides, growing thickly upon his shining, clean-shaven chin. Even his hair, touched here and there with gray, though it had been combed and curled at a hairdresser's, did not give him a stupid appearance, as curled hair usually does, by inevitably suggesting a German on his wedding day. If there really was something unpleasing and repulsive in his rather good-looking and imposing countenance, it was due to quite other causes. After scanning Mr. Luzhin unceremoniously, Raskolnikov smiled malignantly, sank back on the pillow and stared at the ceiling as before. But Mr. Luzhin hardened his heart and seemed to determine to take no notice of their oddities. "I feel the greatest regret at finding you in this situation," he began, again breaking the silence with an effort. "If I had been aware of your illness, I should have come earlier. But you know what business is. I have, too, a very important legal affair in the Senate, not to mention other preoccupations which you may well conjecture. I am expecting your mamma and sister any minute." Raskolnikov made a movement and seemed about to speak. His face showed some excitement. Fyodor Petrovich paused, waited, but as nothing followed, he went on. "Any minute. I have found a lodging for them on their arrival." "Where?" asked Raskolnikov weakly. "Very near here, in Bakalev's house." "That's in Voskresensky," put in Razumihin. "There are 2 stories of rooms, let by a merchant called Yushin. I've been there." "Yes, rooms. A disgusting place, filthy, stinking, and what's more, of doubtful character. Things have happened there, and there are all sorts of queer people living there, and I went there about a scandalous business. It's cheap, though. I could not, of course, find out so much about it, for I am a stranger in Petersburg myself," Fyodor Petrovich replied huffily. "However, the 2 rooms are exceedingly clean, and as it is for so short a time, I have already taken a permanent, that is, our future flat," he said, addressing Raskolnikov, "and I am having it done up. And meanwhile I am myself cramped for room in a lodging with my friend Andrei Semyonovich Lebeziatnikov, in the flat of Madame Lipovetsel. It was he who told me of Bakalev's house, too." "Lebeziatnikov," said Raskolnikov slowly, as if recalling something. "Yes, Andrei Semyonovich Lebeziatnikov, a clerk in the ministry. Do you know him?" "Yes, no," Raskolnikov answered. "Excuse me, I fancied so from your inquiry. I was once his guardian. A very nice young man and advanced. I like to meet young people, one learns new things from them." Luzhin looked round hopefully at them all. "How do you mean?" asked Razumihin. "In the most serious and essential matters," Fyodor Petrovich replied, as though delighted at the question. "You see, it's 10 years since I visited Petersburg. All the novelties, reforms, ideas have reached us in the provinces, but to see it all more clearly one must be in Petersburg. And it's my notion that you observe and learn most by watching the younger generation. And I confess I am delighted." "At what?" "Your question is a wide one. I may be mistaken, but I fancy I find clearer views, more, so to say, criticism, more practicality." "That's true," Zosimov let drop. "Nonsense, there's no practicality." Razumihin flew at him. "Practicality is a difficult thing to find, it does not drop down from heaven, and for the last 200 years we have been divorced from all practical life. Ideas, if you like, are fermenting," he said to Fyodor Petrovich, "and desire for good exists, though it's in a childish form, and honesty you may find, although there are crowds of brigands. Anyway, there's no practicality. Practicality goes well shod." "I don't agree with you," Fyodor Petrovich replied with evident enjoyment. "Of course, people do get carried away and make mistakes, but one must have indulgence. Those mistakes are merely evidence of enthusiasm for the cause and of abnormal external environment. If little has been done, the time has been but short. Of means I will not speak. It's my personal view, if you care to know, that something has been accomplished already. New valuable ideas, new valuable works are circulating in the place of our old dreamy and romantic authors. Literature is taking a maturer form, many injurious prejudices have been rooted up and turned into ridicule. In a word, we have cut ourselves off irrevocably from the past, and that, to my thinking, is a great thing. He's learned it by heart to show off, Raskolnikov pronounced suddenly. What? Asked Fyodor Petrovich, not catching his words, but he received no reply. That's all true, Zosimov hastened to interpose. Isn't it so? Fyodor Petrovich went on, glancing affably at Zosimov. You must admit, he went on, addressing Razumihin with a shade of triumph and superciliousness. He almost added, young man, that there is an advance, or, as they say now, progress in the name of science and economic truth. A commonplace. No, not a commonplace. Hitherto, for instance, if I were told, love thy neighbor, what came of it? Fyodor Petrovich went on, perhaps with excessive haste. It came to my tearing my coat in half to share with my neighbor, and we both were left half naked. As a Russian proverb has it, catch several hares and you won't catch one. Science now tells us, love yourself before all men, for everything in the world rests on self-interest. You love yourself and manage your own affairs properly, and your coat remains whole. Economic truth adds that the better private affairs are organized in society, the more whole coats, so to say, the firmer are its foundations, and the better is the common welfare organized too. Therefore, in acquiring wealth solely and exclusively for myself, I am acquiring, so to speak, for all, and helping to bring to pass my neighbor's getting a little more than a torn coat, and that not from private, personal liberality, but as a consequence of the general advance. The idea is simple, but unhappily it has been a long time reaching us, being hindered by idealism and sentimentality, and yet it would seem to want very little wit to perceive it. Excuse me, I've very little wit myself, Razumihin cut in sharply, and so let us drop it. I began this discussion with an object, but I've grown so sick during the last 3 years of this chattering to amuse oneself, of this incessant flow of commonplaces, always the same, that, by Jove, I blush even when other people talk like that. You are in a hurry, no doubt, to exhibit your acquirements, and I don't blame you, that's quite pardonable. I only wanted to find out what sort of man you are, for so many unscrupulous people have got hold of the progressive cause of late, and have so distorted in their own interests everything they touched, that the whole cause has been dragged in the mire. That's enough. Excuse me, sir, said Luzhin, affronted, and speaking with excessive dignity. Do you mean to suggest so unceremoniously that I too? Oh, my dear sir, how could I? Come, that's enough, Razumihin concluded, and he turned abruptly to Zosimov to continue their previous conversation. Fyodor Petrovich had the good sense to accept the disavowal. He made up his mind to take leave in another minute or two. I trust our acquaintance, he said, addressing Raskolnikov, may, upon your recovery and in view of the circumstances of which you are aware, become closer. Above all, I hope for your return to health. Raskolnikov did not even turn his head. Fyodor Petrovich began getting up from his chair. One of her customers must have killed her, Zosimov declared positively. Not a doubt of it, replied Razumihin. Porfiry doesn't give his opinion, but is examining all who have left pledges with her there. Examining them, Raskolnikov asked aloud. Yes, what then? Nothing. How does he get hold of them? Asked Zosimov. Koch has given the names of some of them, other names are on the wrappers of the pledges, and some have come forward of themselves. It must have been a cunning and practiced ruffian, the boldness of it, the coolness. That's just what it was, interposed Razumihin. That's what throws you all off the scent, but I maintain that he is not cunning, not practiced, and probably this was his first crime. The supposition that it was a calculated crime and a cunning criminal doesn't work. Suppose him to have been inexperienced, and it's clear that it was only a chance that saved him, and chance may do anything. Why he did not foresee obstacles, perhaps. And how did he set to work? He took jewels worth 10 or 20 rubles, stuffing his pockets with them, ransacked the old woman's trunks, her rags, and they found 1,500 rubles besides notes in a box in the top drawer of the chest. He did not know how to rob, he could only murder. It was his first crime, I assure you, his first crime. He lost his head. And he got off more by luck than good counsel. You are talking of the murder of the old pawnbroker, I believe. Fyodor Petrovich put in, addressing Zosimov. He was standing, hat and gloves in hand, but before departing, he felt disposed to throw off a few more intellectual phrases. He was evidently anxious to make a favorable impression, and his vanity overcame his prudence. Yes, you've heard of it. Oh yes, being in the neighborhood. Do you know the details? I can't say that. But another circumstance interests me in the case. The whole question, so to say. Not to speak of the fact that crime has been greatly on the increase among the lower classes during the last 5 years. Not to speak of the cases of robbery and arson everywhere. What strikes me as the strangest thing is that in the higher classes, too, crime is increasing proportionately. In one place, one hears of a student's robbing the mail on the high road. In another place, people of good social position forge false banknotes. In Moscow of late, a whole gang has been captured who used to forge lottery tickets, and one of the ringleaders was a lecturer in universal history. Then our secretary abroad was murdered from some obscure motive of gain. And if this old woman, the pawnbroker, has been murdered by someone of a higher class in society, for peasants don't pawn gold trinkets, how are we to explain this demoralization of the civilized part of our society? There are many economic changes, put in Zosimov. How are we to explain it? Razumihin caught him up. It might be explained by our inveterate impracticality. How do you mean? What answer had your lecturer in Moscow to make to the question why he was forging notes? Everybody is getting rich one way or another, so I want to make haste to get rich too. I don't remember the exact words, but the upshot was that he wants money for nothing, without waiting or working. We've grown used to having everything ready-made, to walking on crutches, to having our food chewed for us. Then the great hour struck, and every man showed himself in his true colors. The emancipation of the serfs in 1861 is meant. Translator's note. But morality, and so to speak, principles. But why do you worry about it? Raskolnikov interposed suddenly. It's in accordance with your theory. In accordance with my theory. Why carry out logically the theory you were advocating just now, and it follows that people may be killed. Upon my word, cried Luzhin. No, that's not so, put in Zosimov. Raskolnikov lay with a white face and twitching upper lip, breathing painfully. There's a measure in all things, Luzhin went on superciliously. Economic ideas are not an incitement to murder, and one has but to suppose. And is it true, Raskolnikov interposed once more suddenly, again in a voice quivering with fury and delight in insulting him, is it true that you told your fiancée, within an hour of her acceptance, that what pleased you most was that she was a beggar, because it was better to raise a wife from poverty, so that you may have complete control over her, and reproach her with your being her benefactor? Upon my word, Luzhin cried wrathfully and irritably, crimson with confusion, to distort my words in this way. Excuse me, allow me to assure you that the report which has reached you, or rather, let me say, has been conveyed to you, has no foundation in truth, and I suspect who, in a word, this arrow, in a word, your mamma. She seemed to me in other things, with all her excellent qualities, of a somewhat high-flown and romantic way of thinking. But I was 1,000 miles from supposing that she would misunderstand and misrepresent things in so fanciful a way. And indeed. I tell you what, cried Raskolnikov, raising himself on his pillow and fixing his piercing, glittering eyes upon him. I tell you what. What? Luzhin stood still, waiting with a defiant and offended face. Silence lasted for some seconds. Why, if ever again you dare to mention a single word about my mother, I shall send you flying downstairs. What's the matter with you? Cried Razumihin. So that's how it is. Luzhin turned pale and bit his lip. Let me tell you, sir, he began deliberately, doing his utmost to restrain himself but breathing hard. At the first moment I saw you were ill-disposed to me, but I remained here on purpose to find out more. I could forgive a great deal in a sick man and a connection, but you, never after this. I am not ill, cried Raskolnikov. So much the worse. Go to hell. But Luzhin was already leaving without finishing his speech, squeezing between the table and the chair. Razumihin got up this time to let him pass. Without glancing at anyone, and not even nodding to Zosimov, who had for some time been making signs to him to let the sick man alone, he went out, lifting his hat to the level of his shoulders to avoid crushing it as he stooped to go out of the door. And even the curve of his spine was expressive of the horrible insult he had received. How could you? Razumihin said, shaking his head in perplexity. Let me alone, all of you, Raskolnikov cried in a frenzy. Will you ever leave off tormenting me? I am not afraid of you. I am not afraid of anyone now. Get away from me. I want to be alone. Come along, said Zosimov, nodding to Razumihin. But we can't leave him like this. Come along, Zosimov repeated insistently, and he went out. Razumihin thought a minute and ran to overtake him. It might be worse not to obey him, said Zosimov on the stairs. He mustn't be irritated. What's the matter with him? If only he could get some favorable shock, that's what would do it. At first he was better. You know he has got something on his mind, some fixed idea weighing on him. I am very much afraid so, he must have. Perhaps it's that gentleman, Fyodor Petrovich. From his conversation, I gather he is going to marry his sister, and that he had received a letter about it just before his illness. Yes, confound the man. He may have upset the case altogether. But have you noticed, he takes no interest in anything. He does not respond to anything except one point on which he seems excited. That's the murder. Yes, Razumihin agreed. I noticed that too. He is interested, frightened. It gave him a shock on the day he was ill in the police office, he fainted. Tell me more about that this evening and I'll tell you something afterwards. He interests me very much. In half an hour I'll go and see him again. There'll be no inflammation though. Thanks, and I'll wait with Pashenka meantime, and we'll keep watch on him through Nastasia.